Hello guys, welcome back. Today we're going to go through all 31 NHL teams and I'm going to be asking one scary question that I have about each team. Now, of course, for Halloween, I thought it would be a fun idea to go through all 31 NHL teams and ask the scariest question that's plaguing their team going forward and heading into November. Now, the first team up is the Anaheim Ducks, and my question for them is if they plan on having John Gibson carry them throughout the whole season. So far, again, as I said in yesterday's video about my NHL awards, I had John Gibson as my Hart Trophy, I guess, winner for October, and I think he's been carrying the Anaheim Ducks to any wins that they've had so far. So for my question for Anaheim, do they plan on continuing pretty much just nailing the other team and pretty much just allowing 30 shots a plus per night? It really isn't a great battle strategy, and let's just hope that Anaheim has some different ideas in them. Next up is the Arizona Coyotes, and my question to them, my scary question to them, is if they can keep up their dominance. While it isn't a scary question, I think the Arizona Coyotes heading into November have really one question. Can they continue their great play? And that's what I'm saying. The Arizona Coyotes have had a great stretch in the last week. They won 4 straight games. They've looked fantastic, and my question to them is if they can continue that. I'd love to see that, and heading into November, it really will be a crucial month if they want to make the playoffs or if they want to be back in the dumpster again. Next up is the Boston Bruins, and my scary question to them is, will there ever be any depth scoring on this team? Honestly, last year, they had that great first line. It was rolling, it was amazing, but they had some nice depth scoring last year. And this year, while they still have some decent players like DeBrusque, Krejci, and some other guys to list off, that first line has pretty much been the entire offense for them. And while it has been working for Boston, I'm not sure how much longer that will last. They got a couple of injuries on the defense, which does hurt things a lot, but a lot of that forward group has been kind of slacking. Guys like DeBrusque haven't done fantastic, and honestly, I want to see more from that middle six for Boston, from guys like Donato and some other young prospects. Right now, Boston has that great first line, but if they continue to just have that, they'll be pretty inconsistent, which they have been so far. Next up, I have the Buffalo Sabres, and my scary question to them is if they can continue their hot start going into November. For me right now, I felt like the Buffalo Sabres had just a little bit of a better start than I think they would have, and I think they should have. Right now, I feel like Buffalo might come back down to earth just a little bit. I still think they're a very decent team, but this past month, Carter Hutton was amazing. The defense was pretty solid. There can be some improvements made on the team, but I think there was a little bit of a peak there in October. So I'm hoping that continue success in November, but I'm just not sure about that. Next up is the Calgary Flames, and my question to them is where does James Neal fit on this team? In the last couple of days, last couple of games, the Calgary Flames have been getting a lot better, but it's mostly because of that first line of Johnny Gaudreau, Monahan, and Lindholm. That line has been carrying Calgary in the last couple of games, and of course the goaltending has been a little bit more solid, but I feel like James Neal is the big piece to the puzzle for Calgary if they ultimately want to get more depth scoring. Right now, he was on the third line with like Jankowski and Sam Bennett, which is a good defensive line, but it's not really going to score you a ton of goals. So I feel like James Neal is kind of in a weird position to where, yeah, he's in a weird position, but he's on a decent team here. I think ultimately if Calgary wants to get more depth scoring, they're going to want to put James Neal in the right position to get those goals, and right now it's just not working. Next up, I have the Carolina Hurricanes, and my scary question to them is where really did the depth scoring go? For that first line, the offense has been pretty inconsistent, but that first line has been great. It was Ferland, Aho, and Teravainen, and I do believe that's been fantastic for them, but with the rest of that offense, it's been pretty lackluster. Some of the rookies like Svechnikov and Fagel have kind of disappeared a little bit offensively, and to me right now, the main concern is that depth scoring. It just hasn't really been there as it was in the first couple of weeks, and if the Hurricanes want to keep getting these wins and want to keep being in a playoff spot, they're going to want to get some more depth scoring, and I think that's the main issue plaguing them right now. Next, I have the Chicago Blackhawks, and my main scary question to them is Corey Crawford. Now, he came back a week and a half ago, which was fantastic to see. He's had a couple of starts then. He's had a couple of good starts, a couple of bad starts. Honestly, I think he's been okay. But if the Chicago Blackhawks want to make the playoffs, they need Corey Crawford to be better than just okay. He needs to be elite. He needs to be fantastic if Chicago wants to sniff the playoffs. So for me right now, there's concerns about Corey Crawford being good enough. There's some concerns about Chicago being good enough. For right now, I think if Corey Crawford and the Chicago Blackhawks want to make the playoffs, though, Corey Crawford needs to be a lot better, not just in October, but for the rest of the year. Next up, I have the Colorado Avalanche, and my main scary question to them is just depth scoring. That first line has been awesome so far. Landeskog, Rantanen, and McKinnon. It's been fantastic, and I'm going to give them full credit for that. But when it comes to the rest of the offense, it just really is not there at all. Some of those guys have been really disappointing. They haven't been as good as I thought they were going to be, and really the Colorado Avalanche offense as a whole has not been that great. While the first line has been spectacular and is leading the league in areas, the rest of that scoring has pretty much just dried up completely since opening night. And I think that's the main question. If that first line dries up at all, I think the Colorado Avalanche are in definite trouble. Next, I have the Columbus Blue Jackets, and my main scary question for them is that whole goaltending situation, honestly, and who will end up becoming the main starter there. Korpisalo has had the last 3 starts, I do believe. He's had a good stretch, and while he had a pretty meh game versus Detroit, overall he's been pretty solid. And Bobrovsky, he just has not been as good as people do expect, and honestly, I still think he's one of the best goaltenders in the world, if not the best goaltender in the world, but so far this season, he's been pretty disappointing, and honestly, there's a whole goaltending mismatch in Columbus right now. I don't think either goaltender is really stepping up. So in this November for Columbus is really crucial. They need to find some goaltending, and either or needs to step up. Whether it's Bobrovsky or Korpisalo, one of them needs to be the guy. Next up, the Dallas Stars, my favorite team in the NHL. And my main scary question to them is, really, where is the offense from the Dallas Stars, the stars of the Dallas Stars? The depth in the last week has contributed pretty nicely. The depth scoring has not been the problem. When it comes to Ben, Sagan, Radulov, well, Radulov has been injured the last couple of games. That first line of what was supposed to be the first line there really hasn't done much in the last week. They had a great first couple of weeks, but in the last week, it's been pretty bare bones from them, and that's why we've lost a couple of games pretty big. The depth offense has been a lot better recently, but those Stars, for the Dallas Stars, need to play a lot better in November, and honestly, that's my main worry. Next up is the Detroit Red Wings, and my question to them is, really, how much better are they going to get? They've won 2 straight games now. Right now, they're looking like the best they have ever had this season. So my question is, will they continue this? Will they be able to get out of the dumpster now with the last couple of wins? Will they be able to continue that momentum into November? The Detroit Red Wings are going to be a little bit more of an interesting team now because they've been a little bit better in that last week of October. But for me right now, the main question is, will they be able to keep it up? Next up is the Edmonton Oilers. Now, I was pretty impressed with their October, and honestly, they faced quite a few great opponents. They got some wins, but my scary question to them is, how much worse can that penalty kill get? In the month of October, their special teams was better. The power play was pretty decent, but that penalty kill was atrocious. I think if they could get that penalty kill sorted out, I think they'll win a lot more games, and they definitely would have won the game versus Minnesota had they not taken those penalties and not allowed those power play goals. So for me right now, Edmonton has played pretty well, but they can get even better with some much better special teams. And if they can sort that out, they can get even more wins. Next up is the Florida Panthers, and man, I could ask a lot of questions, but I have to limit myself to one. Now, they're starting off November with a Global Series game, so that's pretty much a fresh start for them. So my question for them is, how well of a November can they have to bounce back from that pretty disappointing October, and then can they play a lot better? Roberto Luongo is apparently coming back in a week, so if they can get that goaltending sorted out too, that would definitely help Florida's momentum to ultimately have a much better November. At least that's what we're hoping for. Next up is the Los Angeles Kings, and my scary question to them is, can they salvage this season? Now, they're currently on a pretty big homestand. I'm pretty sure it's the biggest homestand of their whole season now, so this is the best time to turn things around, to get things much better. For the LA Kings, it's been a pretty rough month of October. I heard Jonathan Quick was out with surgery, so that's a even bigger blow for LA. So right now, it's not looking good one bit, and and really this is the biggest make or break for their season, I think, for this entire season. This is really what it comes down to. This homestand, I feel like, and if they can't get it done, if they can't get some wins, it might be over for guys like John Stevens, their coach, and it might be over for a lot of that management too. Next up is the Minnesota Wild. Now, they had a pretty decent month of October. They're currently on a pretty big road trip. They're starting out now. I think they're in the midst of a 7-game road trip. So it's a pretty big road trip, and so far I think they're 1-1. They just got a big win versus Edmonton. But to me, my real question to them is how consistent can that offense really be? In the first week, it looked pretty terrible for them. Then it started to really get rolling in the month of October. It was overall pretty solid. But for November and for this road trip, I really want to see consistency from them, especially on the offensive end. If they can get that, they can get even more wins. They got off to a pretty good start in the month of October, but if they want to keep that going, they gotta get that consistency, which they haven't really had so far. Next up is the Montreal Canadiens. Now, this October was really surprising for them, even though that loss versus Dallas was pretty rough. This November is looking to be maybe another good month from them. Now, I'm concerned about that offense going down. That's the main topic of this question. Can the Montreal Canadiens continue the offense that they've had so far this season, especially without Weber? It'll be hard to keep that consistency from them, I feel, and that some of those guys on the defense might slow down, aka Petrie. But some of that offense has had great month to start out, and I feel like it might drop down a little bit. I feel like they'll start to I feel like they'll start to miss Weber a little bit, and even though they didn't really feel that for the start of the season, I feel like this November they'll come back down to earth a little bit. I think they'll still be a decent team, but I think that offense will kind of slow down, unfortunately. Next up, I have the Nashville Predators, and my question to them is, has Saros taken over Pekka Rinne's job already? Now, Pekka Rinne was just off, I think he was just acquired off of IR, so I think he's now healthy for the Nashville Predators, but UC Saros was fantastic and has been fantastic for the Nashville Predators. This season, he was great, and he has been great. So, for me, I feel like UC Saros is starting to take over Rinne's job even quicker than I thought and even quicker than I predicted. Rinne hasn't had the greatest games when he was playing, when he was healthy, but right now I feel like Saros is starting to take over that goalie position a little bit in Nashville, which could create a lot of controversy between Rinne and Saros, even if they're good buddies. Next up, I have the New Jersey Devils, and my scary question to them is that Tampa versus New Jersey game a sign of things to come when it comes to the goaltending? Last game for New Jersey, they got beat 8-3. It was a smashing. It wasn't pretty on New Jersey's end, and for Tampa, they definitely took advantage. But to me, it was Schneider's, I think, first. It wasn't a start. I think he came in for Kincaid, but he was also lit up. Both Kincaid and Schneider didn't have good nights. And to me, the main question is this a sign of New Jersey's goaltending to come? Kincaid had a great start to the season. He was looking pretty solid. And then Schneider came up. Then he was looking to be the backup, technically, for New Jersey. But for right now, I think that New Jersey has a little bit of a carousel in goaltending, which could affect things in the long run. But I think that game versus Tampa might be a sign of things to come when it comes to the performance of both of them. Whether it's Kincaid or Schneider that ends up being the starter job, I'm not really sure on either of them. Next, I have the New York Islanders, and my scary question to them is the goaltending really going to be consistent throughout the whole year, and even heading into November? The New York Islanders have been a surprising team, both for their offense and their goaltending. The goaltending so far has had great stats. They've been pretty solid, and I think that all comes down to Barry Trotz having that new system. But for right now, the goaltending is playing a lot better, both with Greiss and Robin Lehner. They're both playing pretty solid, and right now, my main question is how consistent that will stay. I'm not sure if both of them will stay at the stats that they have. I think one guy might take over the other. But for right now, the Islanders' goaltending is playing very good. I'm not sure how long that will last, though. Next up, I have the New York Rangers. Now, they've gotten a pretty big youth movement this season, and while it hasn't been really translating to wins, they've had a lot of prospects come up and play pretty decent. And to me, my main question is, will we see a fall or will we see a rise in the standings? Because in all honesty, I don't really know what to think of the New York Rangers right now. They just got, I think, a shootout win or an overtime win versus San Jose. That was a pretty big win for them, and honestly, they don't have the worst record in the world. They still have a pretty bad one, but honestly, I don't really know what to think of New York, since they played good against some decent teams there, and of course, while they're not a great team on paper, they could surprise a few teams. I'm just not sure if we'll see them fall or rise, just because they've been such a weird team to watch throughout the last month. Next up, I got the Ottawa Senators, and my main scary question of them involves their performance so far. Now, they've lost 4 straight games. It hasn't looked pretty for them, but they started out the season pretty well. In the first couple of weeks, they had a pretty good record. Their youth was coming up, it was playing well, but now we got a couple of injuries. Brady Tkachuk is still out with an injury. There's a couple of bad ones there, and my main worry for Ottawa is how far they're going to come back down to earth again. People expect them to be not the greatest team in the world, to say the least, and right now, they're really playing like we all thought they would. Right now, they're losing games pretty handily. The offense isn't going at all, and really nothing's really working for Ottawa. They just had Mike Cotton just let in a goal from the blue line at the other side of the ice. So right now it isn't working for Ottawa, and my main question to them is really, is this what we expected? Because right now, they're certainly playing like a lot of people expected, which is one of the worst teams in the league. Next up, I got the Philadelphia Flyers, and my main question to them is, can they have a much better November? Now, this month was pretty disastrous for Philadelphia. They got that huge win versus Anaheim, which again, is huge for them. They found some goaltending, which is going to be the key for them. If they can find goaltending going into November, it really will be a much better month for them. In October, they couldn't find goaltending between Calvin McCarr and Brian Elliott, and it just became a disaster for them. So if they can find some goaltending, if they can find some wins, they'll ultimately be a much better team, of course, but goaltending is really what it comes down to it for Philadelphia pretty much every single year, and this month will be crucial for them once again. Next up, I have the Pittsburgh Penguins, and my main question to them is, can they consistently become reliable defensively without Justin Schultz? Now, in the last couple of weeks, they've been on really a tear. They've gotten a lot of offense, they've gotten a lot of defense, and they've gotten some great goaltending. And that one game versus New York was not the greatest, but it was pretty much an anomaly in what was a pretty good month for Pittsburgh. If they can continue that into November, they'll be pretty well off. And of course, they're still missing Justin Schultz, so I've been pretty impressed with what their defense has been able to do. It hasn't been fantastic, but it's been good enough to get wins, and of course that offense has been fantastic enough to get that great and to get all those goals, to get all those wins. Right now Pittsburgh is playing pretty well. They can continue any of that going into November, they'll still have a very, very good record by the end of the year. Next up, I have the St. Louis Blues, and my scary question to them is, can they find some freaking goaltending going into November? And my main question, my main concern is on Jake Allen, of course. He was really, really weird in October. I felt like he had some good games, I felt like he had some bad ones, of course, though, and ultimately he didn't have the greatest October. To me right now, I feel like for St. Louis, the biggest problem is defense. They haven't been able to get a lot of that lately. The goaltending has been pretty bad for them, though, but if Jake Allen can really step up like he needs to, I think St. Louis will ultimately have a much better November, and their schedule, I think, is getting a little bit easier. I'm not sure about that, but for St. Louis, this November is really crucial for Mike Yeo's job and for a lot of those players' jobs right now. They're not playing the greatest, but they can continue that momentum that they got in that good win versus Blackhawks, and they can continue that into November. They'll have a pretty good month. Next up, I got the San Jose Sharks, and my main question to them is, after an iffy October, will we see a much better month from Martin Jones? He was my pick to be the Vezina Trophy winner. Obviously, right now it's not looking the greatest prediction, but if Martin Jones can be a lot better, if he can be a lot more consistent and reliable, I feel like the San Jose Sharks will get a lot more wins. Well, I don't know if that defensively has been the greatest. I feel like there's a lot of improvements to be made with San Jose right now, even if they still have a great team on paper. And I feel like Martin Jones is one of the key areas that they have to improve on. For me right now, I do still have a lot of faith in Martin Jones being the guy, but he needs to be a lot better in November to really make San Jose into the team that I think they can be. Next up, I got the Tampa Bay Lightning, and my main question to them is really the backup goaltending in Louis Domingue. I think that Vasilevsky has had a fantastic year so far. The Tampa Bay Lightning have had a fantastic start to the year so far, so they're looking good. But I think the main weakness for them, and especially their main question going into November, is Louis Domingue. He hasn't had the greatest start. He's got a couple of wins now, but his save percentage and overall numbers aren't the greatest, even though if he's only played a few games here. I think he needs to step up here, and while I don't think he's really that NHL caliber backup right now, I don't know if he ever has been that. I think that if the Tampa Bay Lightning need Vasilevsky ready to go going into the playoffs, they need a good performance from Louis Domingue throughout the year, and so far he's not giving me a lot of confidence in that actually happening. Next up, I got the Toronto Maple Leafs, and maybe one of the more predictable, scary questions in this video. My scary question to them is, how will they be able to adapt without Austin Matthews? Now, without Austin Matthews, that game versus Calgary was pretty rough for them across the board. They weren't able to do too much. The offense was pretty much floundering. They weren't able to do and weren't able to get a lot of chances. And you could obviously see the effects of Matthews not being on that team. Even without Matthews, that offense is still fantastic, and there was no reason why they shouldn't have been better in that game. So I think that honestly Toronto will be pretty good in the time that Austin Matthews has gone there, because I don't think they would need to rely on him to get those wins, because they got guys like John Tavares and Nazem Kadri at the center position. But right now, it definitely is a weakness. It definitely is going to lessen their team because Austin Matthews is out. And so far, we've seen that. And while I don't think it's a disaster for Toronto, I feel like we'll see some losses that maybe wouldn't have been that way if Austin Matthews were in the lineup. Next up, I got the Vancouver Canucks, and my scary question to them is, what will they be able to do and how many games will they be able to perform well in with all these injuries? While it's not the big guys like Elias Pettersson and Brock Besser injured right now, they just came off of the injured reserve and they just came off of injury. Right now, there's a lot of spare pieces and a lot of big pieces for Vancouver on the IR, on the injured list. And they got guys like Anders Nilsson out, Alex Edler, Suter. They got some solid guys in the injured list right now for Vancouver. While it isn't game-breaking for them, they got off to a good start. And if they want to continue that, they got to get a lot more healthy. And right now, they just aren't that. Next up, I got the Vegas Golden Knights, and my scary question to them going into November is, will they be able to adapt still without Nate Schmidt? Right now, we've seen the big effects of Nate Schmidt not being on the Vegas Golden Knights. The offense, defensively, has kind of shortened up. The defense has been pretty atrocious at times, and for Vegas, they've been severely missing Nate Schmidt. He just signed an extension. He's a big part of that Vegas Golden Knights team, and we've seen how bad they can be. Now, he still has, I think, a few games left on his suspension. I think the Vegas Golden Knights play maybe 10 more games on a suspension right now, but they're still going to have to make up ground with Nate Schmidt out. Right now, they're still not a good record. They still haven't played well without him, and I think ultimately Nate Schmidt was a huge part of that team, and right now, of course, being suspended, he's not helping. So for Vegas, they're going to have to find ways to get wins while he's gone, or else it could be too late when he comes back. Next up, I got the Washington Capitals, and my scary question to them is really Braden Holtby, and if he can stay consistent. Braden Holtby has had a weird season so far. I think he's played decent, but he's had some games where he's just looked atrocious. He's had some games where he's looked fantastic, though. And I think for Braden Holtby and the Washington Capitals, they got off to a decent start, but it really should be a lot better for them. I think if they want to get a lot more wins and they want to be atop of the Metropolitan Division again, Braden Holtby needs to step up, and he needs to be a lot better than he was in the regular season last year. So for me right now, I need to see more from Holtby, and if we do see that, Washington will likely have a much better month in November, and they'll likely rise to the standings like they usually do. Last but not least, I got the Winnipeg Jets, and my scary question of them is, what are they planning to do with Patrik Laine? So far, he hasn't gotten out to the greatest starts, especially goal-scoring wise, where he's kind of slowed down a little bit. And for the Winnipeg Jets, we've seen Patrik Laine being juggled across the lineup on the first line, on the second line, and I think he's been on the third line a couple of times throughout the Jets games. And right now, it's just not really working. Wherever the Jets put Patrik Laine, it just hasn't seemed to work, and while the team has played pretty decent, it's been pretty much not because of Laine, it's been because of other factors, some good defense as well, but I think they're really missing Patrik Laine's goal-scoring boost their team every time he scores, and of course right now, so far this season, he hasn't been able to score as many as a lot of people do expect. So for me, I think Winnipeg is kind of in big trouble, especially if Laine doesn't get going, because I think at the end of the day, I think that they'll probably need Patrik Laine's goals, and I think they'll need him throughout the whole year, and if he doesn't produce, that could be trouble for Winnipeg, at least when it comes to the standings. But of course, with this video, I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about the 31 questions that I posed in this video when it comes to every single team? What do you think about the situations that I talked about, and of course the players, the slumps, and maybe the hot streaks that I talked about throughout this video? Now, if you want some more Grav goodness, you can watch this video where I talk about the NHL award leaders for the first month of the NHL season. But now's for today, guys. If you guys did enjoy, make sure you like and subscribe. Again, comment down below what you thought about all 31 teams and the questions that I posed in this video. Again, happy Halloween to everyone watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video or stream. Goodbye.